Because the right day to quit smoking is the day you do it, I welcome you to this video. It marks the beginning of a true inner journey, designed to help you quit smoking in a simple, clear, and lasting way. This video is based on the Allen Carr method, known worldwide for its ability to free smokers without physical suffering or frustration. Throughout this video, we will explore in depth the real mechanisms of addiction, and how to break free from it naturally and permanently. And above all, do not try to quit smoking right now. Keep smoking as usual while watching this video. This is an essential part of the process. The goal here is to help you break free from smoking for good by clearing up the misconceptions and false beliefs that fuel your addiction. This method is designed to guide you towards a stress-free and easy quit. While you're going through the process, feel free to smoke as much as you want. Do not try to quit until you're clearly told to do so. The signal to put out your final cigarette will come at the right moment. By following this step-by-step approach, you give yourself every chance to succeed. It's mainly a matter of awareness and common sense, without any unnecessary pressure. It's important to start this journey with confidence, as addiction often triggers fear and doubt. This method has been used successfully for years and has already helped many people break free. The best day to quit is the day you decide to. And today could be that day. While watching, stay calm and relaxed. Take the time to really understand the advice given, and trust the process. Whether you smoke 5 cigarettes a day or 2 packs, it doesn't change the reality: you are a smoker. The only real difference between a smoker and a non-smoker is that the non-smoker simply doesn't smoke. They just don't feel the need to. This is important to understand, because people often say that smoking just a little doesn't really count. But that idea is false. No one is born with a cigarette in their hand. We all started smoking by imitation: friends, adults, people we admired. And at first, let's be honest, the first puffs were often unpleasant, even downright disgusting. But we kept going, telling ourselves we'd stop whenever we wanted. And then the years passed. 20, 30 years for some, smoking without really feeling free to quit. Each attempt ended in failure. Because behind the cigarette, there's something stronger than us. Something we don't control. It's a trap. And like any trap, it was designed to catch us. In the case of tobacco, it rests on 2 pillars: a physical dependence on nicotine, and above all, a psychological dependence. The latter is by far the most powerful. The physical withdrawal is so mild it doesn't even wake you up at night. But the mental need can completely block you. And this is the part most methods ignore. Yet this is where the real battle of quitting takes place. It's a deeply rooted idea. To quit smoking, you need willpower. And maybe you've already tested yours without lasting success. In reality, smokers don't have less willpower than others. But here's the thing: nicotine is a drug that distorts logical reasoning. If we could think clearly, we wouldn't keep poisoning ourselves knowing full well that tobacco kills. It remains a major cause of preventable death. In France, in 2023, around 75,000 deaths were attributed to it, representing about 13% of the country's total mortality. This estimate has remained relatively stable over the years. Tobacco is responsible for many serious diseases, including cancers, cardiovascular diseases, and respiratory conditions. It's not a matter of intelligence. It's not because these people were weak or stupid. They were just afraid to quit. Afraid of what they thought they'd lose. The problem is precisely this idea of sacrifice. As long as we think quitting smoking means giving up a pleasure or a support, we exhaust ourselves. We struggle. And over time, willpower runs out. That's why only 5% of smokers succeed with sheer willpower. The real driver isn't pressure, it's desire. What matters is changing what you think about the cigarette. Because how we think determines how we feel. It's not your personality or some personal flaw that makes you addicted. It's not weakness. It's not a lack of courage. It's simply that you were trapped. But you can escape that trap not by forcing yourself, but by opening your eyes. Whether you smoke, vape, or do both, in other words, if you consume nicotine in any form, you live with a constant inner conflict. On one hand, you'd like to quit. For your health, your wallet, your freedom. Maybe you're tired of feeling dependent, of not being able to decide for yourself. And on the other hand, you feel like smoking gives you something: pleasure, comfort, a break in your day. Or simply a way to manage your emotions. This constant tension has a name in psychology: cognitive dissonance. It's the gap between what you want to do and what you keep doing. You smoke, but you don't feel at peace with it. Over time, this eats away at your self-confidence. The key to quitting smoking calmly lies in resolving this inner conflict. Remember, tobacco works on two levels. The physical addiction and the psychological addiction, the trickiest one. As long as you don't address both, you stay trapped. So you live in a constant paradox. Part of you wants to stop. The other wants to keep going. And it's this tug-of-war you'll need to resolve. Let's start by clearly defining what we mean by addiction. It's that moment when, even though you want to quit, you feel incapable of doing so. You may have tried everything: willpower, nicotine substitutes, promises. And yet you keep smoking. Because an irrational force seems to push you to smoke. But that force isn't as strong as you might think. Take a simple example. You go to bed at 11 p.m. and wake up at 7 a.m. 8 hours pass without you smoking. You weren't in agony. If you smoke during the night, it's not because of nicotine withdrawal, but because you suffer from insomnia. And if you're like many people, you don't smoke the instant you wake up. You take a shower, make your coffee. And only then do you light your first cigarette. That means sometimes 10, 12, even 13 hours can go by without smoking. And still, you don't feel any identifiable physical pain. When you're at the movies or in a hospital, you can easily go 2 hours without a cigarette. And you're not doubled over in pain. This clearly shows that the physical addiction is very weak. The real discomfort is in your mind. It's not a physical pain, but a psychological panic. A fear of running out of cigarettes. A sense of need that arises mentally: how many cigarettes do I have left? Will I make it through the evening? And it's this panic that drives you to go out and buy a pack at 10 p.m. Because you have none left for the next morning. Yet objectively, your body is not suffering from anything. What you're feeling is not physical withdrawal. It's a mental fear of not being able to smoke. And that fear is completely irrational. Since we're talking about physical addiction, let's now discuss nicotine. Nicotine is a drug. And a very powerful one because of how quickly it creates addiction. A single cigarette can be enough to cause dependence. In terms of speed, it rivals heroin. Fortunately, physiologically, it is much easier to eliminate. Within 2 hours, half of the nicotine you absorbed is already out of your body. It is processed by the liver and kidneys and ends up in your urine. In a few days, 3 to 5 on average, no active nicotine remains in your system. Even after decades of smoking, elimination happens quickly. And despite what you might think, it doesn't hurt. There is no identifiable physical pain linked to nicotine withdrawal. Nothing like a violent detox. The body adapts very well. What makes quitting difficult is not the physical withdrawal. It's the belief that you are losing something. That false idea that by quitting, you're depriving yourself. And this mental frustration grows over time if you don't change your view of smoking. Some people even start to somatize this psychological distress. They feel tired, irritable, anxious. But all of this is just a reflection of what they believe they have lost, not the actual absence of nicotine. You can imagine this physical addiction as a little monster living in your stomach. It only lives if you feed it. Stop feeding it, and in a few days, it dies on its own. This little monster is quickly neutralized. The real problem is the big monster in your head, the one that makes you believe you need to smoke. Nicotine is eliminated very quickly from your body. The discomfort you feel is not physical but psychological. And good news, you can diffuse this discomfort. To understand what psychological addiction really is, we first need to briefly look at how our brain works. Inside our heads, we have an incredibly powerful tool, a true biological computer capable of recording thousands of pieces of information every day. But no matter how efficient it is, this computer has two major limitations. First, it cannot analyze in detail everything it records. Second, it does all this without us even being aware of it. What it stores without our permission or attention is called the subconscious. This subconscious is a huge reservoir of memories, emotions, and automatisms. It is where all our learning phases are stored, often without filters or hindsight. And even though we have the illusion of being free and autonomous individuals, a large part of our thoughts and behaviors is influenced by what we recorded without paying attention. Let's take a simple example. We all feel like we have our own style, but in reality, we dress more or less like the era and environment we live in impose on us. Even our differences often follow collective codes. This doesn't prevent creativity, of course, but we must acknowledge that we are strongly influenced by what we have absorbed over time. The subconscious could be called our sleeping partner. It acts like a cat that, once it discovers the radiator is warm, doesn't need to think twice before going back to it. It has learned, it knows, it acts. We work the same way. Most of the time we live in automatic mode. Breathing, walking, driving, cycling. These are actions we have learned, know how to do, and perform without thinking. And this is where the connection to smoking becomes obvious. Since your birth, you have been exposed to thousands of messages from your surroundings, the media, society that shaped an idea. Smoking is a common, ordinary, even useful behavior. The problem is that all this information has accumulated in your brain without you having the time to analyze each one individually. And today, your mind returns them to you as truths. Because they have been there for a long time, they seem logical, credible, and above all, they belong to you. So you think you chose to believe this. But in reality, these are conditioned reflexes, deeply rooted in your subconscious. And it is this mechanism, this invisible mental programming, that constitutes the real core of psychological addiction. Let's look at a few concrete examples of how your brain has learned to associate certain situations with smoking, often without you even realizing it. Picture this scene. Someone walks out of their office after a tense meeting. They automatically head outside to smoke. They puff on their cigarette, looking preoccupied. It's an ordinary scene, one we see every day. They smoke, that's all. But if we take a moment to analyze, why are they really smoking? The most obvious answer seems to be that they're stressed. Makes sense, right? And yet, no. The real reason is much simpler. They smoke because they're a smoker. A non-smoker would go through that same moment of stress without lighting a cigarette. So the link we make between smoking and stress is just a reflex association, not a fact. And we have thousands of these kinds of associations. Take another example: a group of friends on a cafe terrace, drinks in hand. The mood is relaxed, people are laughing, and several are smoking as they raise their glasses. Once again, without thinking, our brain records a link: pleasure plus cigarette equals natural pair. And if I ask you why they're smoking, you might want to say the cigarette enhances the moment or adds intimacy. But again, the only valid explanation is that they smoke because they are smokers. Non-smokers don't need to light up when they're enjoying time with friends. It's just an automatic behavior. Nothing more. These associations, cigarette and stress, cigarette and relaxation, cigarette and pleasure, were formed over time, without analysis or perspective. And today, these connections are so deeply ingrained that they give us the illusion that smoking is natural in certain situations. This conditioning, powerful and subtle, makes us believe the cigarette has a role, a function, a purpose. But it's just a series of reflexes. And once you understand that, it becomes much easier to break them. We all live with conditioning. That's not a problem in itself. It's normal to have been influenced by what our parents taught us to enjoy or to eat. As long as these habits don't put our health at risk, they're just part of life. There's no reason to worry about preferring tea over coffee. But with cigarettes, it's not just ordinary conditioning. It's a full-scale brainwashing, massive, structured, and repeated. A collective, widespread, and powerful effort to make us believe that smoking is not only normal, but useful, pleasant, even empowering. Tobacco is a plant native to the Americas, brought to Europe in the 15th century. But the cigarette as we know it today, mass-produced and easy to use, only appeared at the very end of the 19th century. It was the invention of machines capable of producing cigarettes in large quantities that led to its widespread use. This shift turned tobacco from an artisanal product into a global phenomenon, making nicotine available everywhere, at any time, and greatly reinforcing addiction. A few numbers to illustrate the scale. In 1890, about 4 to 5 million cigarettes were smoked in France. A century later, in 1990, that number had risen to 100 billion. Not because the population had grown 20-fold, but because the tobacco epidemic spread like never before. Since then, smoking has significantly decreased. In 2025, it's estimated that about 60 to 70 billion cigarettes are smoked each year in France. This important drop is due to public health campaigns, repeated price increases, and a growing awareness of the dangers of tobacco. But despite this decrease, the consequences remain devastating. According to Santé Publique France and the National Cancer Institute, tobacco is still the leading cause of preventable death. In 2023, it was responsible for about 75,000 deaths, nearly 200 every day, including 45,000 from cancer and 17,000 from cardiovascular disease. Tobacco kills 1 in 2 smokers. It's a health disaster, but also a psychological trap. A trap you may have fallen into. But nothing forces you to stay there. You have the right and the power to escape it. If you're here today, if you're watching this video, it means you have the desire to break free. And that's excellent news. Keep one thing in mind: your subconscious deeply influences what you believe. And you were born in a century where cigarettes were part of the scenery. Your brain, without meaning to, has linked smoking with all sorts of situations. But those links can be broken. And that's exactly what we'll continue to do together. Your journey with tobacco begins at one very specific moment, the day of your very first cigarette. That day, without realizing it, you did much more than just a simple gesture. You received a real hit of nicotine. No one told you like that, but that's what happened. Unlike other drugs you were warned against, cigarettes were legal and freely available. So naturally, many followed this path without suspecting the trap. And here's what happened. You inhaled smoke, nicotine passed through your lungs and directly into your bloodstream. Within seconds, it reached your brain. 7 seconds later, your liver began its work, eliminating the poison. Because yes, nicotine is indeed a poison. And your body, which always seeks balance, doesn't want it. When it starts to eliminate it, you feel a vague discomfort. It's not sharp pain, but a dull unease, like a void or inner tension. You could call it a hunger for nicotine. And since your body is trying to rid itself of that unpleasant feeling, it sends signals to your brain. You then feel a craving to smoke. You light another cigarette. Not because it's pleasant, but because it relieves the discomfort created by the previous one. The first one seemed disgusting, you coughed, maybe felt dizzy. But the next one seemed less bad. In reality, it wasn't better. It simply calmed the withdrawal caused by the previous one. That's how the trap closes. Without you even realizing it. And here lies the big lie, you don't feel good when you're not smoking. So the moment you light one up, that fleeting relief gives you the illusion that it makes you feel better. But in reality, it only relieves the craving that it created itself. Let's talk here about a subtle aspect of the cigarette trap. When you're a smoker, your brain constantly confuses two sensations: hunger for food and the need for nicotine. These two cravings create very similar feelings: a void, a vague discomfort, a kind of inner tension. You know real hunger, a gnawing in the stomach, a drop in energy, sometimes even a bit of anxiety. And when you eat, that unpleasant feeling goes away, which is why eating is perceived as a pleasure. But with nicotine, it's a trap. Unlike real hunger, the craving doesn't disappear for long when you smoke, it just keeps coming back. In fact, the more you smoke, the more your body adapts to the drug. It becomes less sensitive to its effects, it builds a kind of tolerance. As a result, you have to increase the dose to feel the same relief. On the day of your first cigarette, maybe just one puff was enough to make your head spin. But gradually, you went from 5 to 10 to 20 cigarettes a day, or more, just to avoid the craving, not for pleasure anymore. That's how the illusion sets in. You're not smoking for pleasure anymore, but simply to avoid the discomfort. And this discomfort keeps coming back, because your body eliminates nicotine very quickly. About half the dose is gone every 2 hours. As a result, on average, smokers light a cigarette every 40 minutes. That's no coincidence, the manufacturers know this very well. That's exactly why there are 20 cigarettes in a pack. And that's where the trap gets devious: you're not smoking for enjoyment, but to relieve a discomfort. A discomfort you can't even clearly identify, you just smoke to ease an unpleasant feeling caused by nicotine withdrawal. If someone asks you to describe the pleasure of smoking, you'll struggle. What you'll describe are moments: I smoke after a meal or with a coffee, for example. But not the pleasure itself. And that's normal, there is none. The only pleasure is the end of a mild discomfort. If we had to compare it, it's like carrying a backpack full of rocks all day. At first, the weight seems bearable, almost normal. But over time, it wears you down, slows you down, and keeps you from moving freely. When you finally take it off, you feel instantly better. But that's not a good reason to keep wearing it every day just so you can enjoy taking it off in the evening. That weight is nicotine dependence, this constant need that limits your freedom and well-being. But you can choose to put the backpack down. That's what quitting smoking really is: freeing yourself from an unnecessary burden so you can move forward lighter and better. The smoker spends the whole day trying to soothe this invisible craving. And the worst part is they don't even realize it, because the nicotine craving is imperceptible. It's not sharp pain, not a clear signal, just a vague urge, a small emptiness, a tension. And with each cigarette, that feeling fades temporarily. So the brain ends up associating the cigarette with relief, even emotional support. And the more you get used to this pattern, the more you feel like the cigarette plays a role in every part of your day. But all of this is just illusion, deeply rooted beliefs, but false ones. Let's now take a very telling example: a person addicted to heroin. When they don't get their dose, their body sends them violent signals. The withdrawal is so intense, so painful, that they might be willing to do anything to get an injection. And they know it very well. They are using a drug and paying the price physically. But with a smoker, none of that happens. When they haven't smoked for a while, they never say, "I'm suffering too much, I need nicotine now, I can't take it anymore." No. They will rather say, "I could go for a little cigarette." And that changes everything. Why this difference in vocabulary, attitude, perception? Because nicotine withdrawal is almost imperceptible. It's there, very real, but it acts silently. It doesn't cause unbearable pain, just a slight inattention, a void, a mild discomfort. And yet, it is this very lack that drives someone to smoke. What's troubling is that the smoker never feels like they are using a drug. They aren't aware that they're taking a dose to calm a craving. They believe they smoke because they enjoy it, or because it helps them relax. But the truth is that they smoke to relieve a craving caused by the previous cigarette. And this is perhaps the saddest part of it all. A smoker's life becomes an endless series of efforts to regain a sense of well-being that non-smokers feel naturally. A never-ending loop that leads nowhere. Before you smoked your very first cigarette, you were naturally at 100% of your well-being. This basic, innate well-being can be compared to that of an infant. When they are hungry, they cry, you feed them, they are soothed, they smile at you, and everything returns to normal. That is natural balance. Of course, life has its challenges, but before becoming a smoker, you never felt the need to smoke. Then one day, like many others, you crossed that line. Whatever the reason, curiosity, peer pressure, or something else, you lit your first cigarette. That moment is crucial because it marks the beginning of a cycle. And contrary to what one might think, that first cigarette didn't give you intense pleasure. It didn't boost your well-being to 200%. On the contrary, it probably caused nausea, coughing, or dizziness. Not only did it offer nothing positive, but it initiated a loss of well-being. Because by smoking, you introduced nicotine into your body. It quickly passed from your lungs into your bloodstream, then was filtered by your liver. And it's precisely when the liver starts eliminating the nicotine that a feeling of emptiness appears. Not pain, but discomfort, like a small artificial hunger created in your body. That void, that slight craving, is something your body doesn't want. It reacts by triggering a nerve impulse, which signals the brain that the void must be filled. So you light another cigarette. It's still unpleasant, but it temporarily soothes that feeling. The brain registers this fleeting relief, without you being fully aware of it. You feel a bit better, but it's not pleasure, it's just the relief of a discomfort caused by the previous cigarette. This cycle repeats. With each cigarette, the same process sets in. And over time, the body starts to get used to nicotine. It develops a kind of resistance, which means the next cigarette no longer fully relieves the craving caused by the last one. The effect weakens, but the need remains. The craving becomes deeper, more frequent, more present. And the more you smoke, the more the addiction sets in. The supposed pleasure fades, and satisfaction becomes mechanical. You smoke less and less for the taste or pleasure, and more to relieve a constant craving. You end up in a paradoxical situation. You smoke too much, your body is saturated, and at the same time, you never smoke enough to fully soothe the craving. This spiral doesn't only affect your overall well-being, it also impacts other aspects of your health. Your energy decreases. It's not just age. Nicotine prevents your blood from effectively carrying oxygen. Your muscles are less nourished, and this results in greater fatigue. You live with fear. Even unconsciously, every smoker knows that tobacco is dangerous. This isn't news. The warnings are everywhere. This constant awareness generates a background anxiety that is unpleasant and burdensome. Your self-esteem is affected. You know you shouldn't be smoking. And because you can't seem to stop, you feel weak, lacking willpower. This creates a negative self-image that eats away at you. But here is the good news: if you haven't developed an irreversible illness, your body is capable of returning to balance. In just a few days, or 2 to 3 weeks at most, you can regain that natural well-being you had before your very first cigarette. This return to the non-smoker state is quicker than people think. And it comes with huge benefits. You regain energy, fear disappears, your self-image improves, and you reclaim your freedom. It's essential to understand that smoking does not provide real pleasure. It only calms a discomfort caused by the previous cigarette. We believe smoking helps us relax, focus, or fight boredom, but these are illusions. The only real effect of the cigarette is to temporarily relieve a craving you created yourself. Remember this well: it's not pleasure, it's a temporary release from discomfort. Tobacco doesn't give you anything, it only gives back what it stole. And today, you have the power to end it. You understand that each cigarette only relieves a feeling of emptiness and discomfort created by the lack of nicotine. It is this temporary relief that your brain gradually associates with different moments of your day. As a result, you feel like the cigarette gives you well-being in all kinds of situations, that it soothes you, rewards you, supports you during effort, or helps you relax. But let's be objective: how could a drug with no real psychoactive effect act as both a stimulant and a relaxant, help you concentrate and unwind, relieve stress and boredom? These states are opposite. And yet many smokers sincerely believe that cigarettes help them manage stress, concentration, boredom, and relaxation. These are just illusions. What you feel when you smoke is not true well-being but simply the disappearance of discomfort caused by craving. Once you see this mechanism clearly, these beliefs fall away on their own. And with them, the trap begins to unravel. One of the most persistent misconceptions among smokers is that cigarettes help manage stress. Yet in reality, smoking does not reduce stress, it continuously generates it. If cigarettes really relieved stress, smokers would be among the most relaxed people. Instead, they are often among the most tense. This paradox is easy to explain. The stress felt is not only from the situations experienced. It adds to the stress caused by nicotine withdrawal. And this stress is constant as long as the addiction exists. Take an example: 2 identical people face the same stressful situation, for instance a job interview. One is a smoker, the other is not. Both feel the pressure related to the interview. But the smoker also carries the subtle stress of nicotine withdrawal that has built up overnight. Their brain does not distinguish the sources of stress, everything is felt as one block. When they light their first cigarette of the day, the nicotine temporarily relieves the craving but not the stress from the interview. This relief is mistakenly interpreted as a calming effect of the cigarette when in fact it only masks a craving that the cigarette itself created. This confusion happens throughout the day. The harder the day, the more the smoker lights cigarettes. Each time they experience slight relief, but again it is only relief from the physical craving caused by nicotine withdrawal, not the real causes of stress. The brain, unable to clearly identify the source of discomfort, maintains the illusion that cigarettes relax. In reality, cigarettes maintain a constant tension, that of the craving cycle. This is why smokers are often more nervous, anxious, and restless. Once freed from this addiction, the body regains a more stable state. Stress does not disappear, of course, it is part of life, but it becomes easier to manage. The overall state is calmer and more composed. Life's difficulties, once seen as insurmountable, become challenges that are manageable and sometimes even stimulating. Nicotine only relieves the stress it causes. And it is precisely this mechanism that traps. A common misconception among smokers is that smoking helps them concentrate better. In reality, it is not the cigarette that improves concentration, but rather the fact that it temporarily relieves the constant need for nicotine. This need acts as a permanent distraction, preventing full attention. When a smoker lights a cigarette, they calm this feeling of craving, which allows them to concentrate without being interrupted by this hunger for nicotine. It is comparable to a person trying to focus while being hungry for a long time. Hunger becomes the only thought, preventing any other concentration. In the same way, the feeling of nicotine withdrawal monopolizes the attention of a smoker who must smoke to avoid this distraction. Furthermore, nicotine itself harms concentration, because it reduces the ability of hemoglobin to transport oxygen and essential nutrients necessary for the proper functioning of the brain. Finally, if smoking really helped concentration, more companies would hire people who smoke a lot. However, this is not the case. Nicotine does not improve concentration, it simply masks the discomfort caused by its own absence. Another illusion maintained by the smoker is the belief that smoking relieves boredom. Boredom is simply a moment when attention is no longer focused on a task. This happens naturally several times a day to allow the brain to relax. In smokers, these moments of pause immediately trigger the urge to light a cigarette. Because the brain, now free, picks up the signals of nicotine withdrawal. And without even thinking about it, the cigarette becomes an automatic response. Smoking then gives the illusion of doing something. But in reality, it is not boredom that is relieved, it is the nicotine craving that is temporarily eased. Let's look at the moment when you try to relax, for example during a break. Many smokers are convinced that the cigarette break is a real moment of relaxation. And it's true, it's a pleasant moment. But not because of the cigarette. It's simply because you stopped working. You light a cigarette, you feel a bit more relaxed than before, and you conclude that it's thanks to the cigarette. In reality, nicotine has only temporarily relieved the tension created by its own absence. Quitting smoking provides real well-being, both physically, psychologically, and financially. Physically, breathing returns to normal because the lungs are no longer attacked by burning smoke. Even at rest, a smoker breathes in an altered way, which changes as soon as they quit. Quickly, the lungs fill with air, the blood receives more oxygen, which leads to a boost in energy and better overall fitness. Throat irritation disappears, the sense of smell and taste improve, and the visible signs of nicotine, yellowed fingers, teeth, unpleasant breath, gradually fade. The skin also becomes healthier, with a more radiant complexion. Psychologically, quitting frees you from fears related to smoking and allows you to fully enjoy the freedom of being done with this addiction for good. Finally, from a financial perspective, no longer buying cigarettes means substantial savings. Smoking is a real illness, quitting is the beginning of a healing process. The decision to quit is therefore a lasting source of joy. The mechanism of the tobacco trap is now understood. It is clear that quitting smoking involves no sacrifice, and that the cigarette has been given a power it never truly had. Escaping this trap will be made easier by the upcoming instructions. Before that, one essential point must be addressed. It may seem tempting to think that by quitting today, one could still smoke occasionally, going from smoker to non-smoker, then to occasional smoker, with just one cigarette now and then. This idea must be clarified immediately. The status of occasional smoker does not exist. You are either a smoker or a non-smoker. There is nothing in between. Having one cigarette again does not simply mean I want a cigarette, but also I choose to become a smoker again. That is, to go back to the path of thousands of other cigarettes. Nicotine is a drug as powerful as heroin in terms of how quickly it creates addiction. A single dose is enough to recreate dependence. It is important to reflect on the real usefulness of believing that the cigarette provides something. In reality, it has provided nothing and is not necessary for life, joy, or happiness. The reason to quit is simply being fed up with smoking. Saying I want a cigarette is the same as saying I want to be a smoker. The choice is now clear: freedom or prison. In a few minutes, it will be time to smoke one last cigarette, the one that will symbolize the end of a life of addiction and the beginning of a free life. From the moment it is extinguished, you will already have become a non-smoker. There is no need to wait for nicotine to completely leave your body. You are a non-smoker the very moment you stop smoking. Before taking this concrete step, it is natural to still feel some hesitation. You may have doubts or fears crossing your mind, wondering how to handle certain everyday moments without a cigarette. These thoughts are normal after years of smoking. Rest assured, all of this calms down very quickly. Let's take a moment to talk about a powerful but often unconscious obstacle: the fear of quitting smoking. Even if it does not always show clearly, it is indeed what has held you back until now, constantly postponing the decision to move on. Where does this fear come from? By regularly supplying nicotine to your body, your brain has come to manage this artificial need as if it were a vital function, just like drinking or eating. It believes that smoking is necessary for your survival, which is obviously false. But this confusion, deeply rooted, feeds the feeling of insecurity at the idea of quitting. Fortunately, it is absolutely possible to take this path to freedom without anxiety or pain. Here's why. Firstly, quitting smoking does not hurt. The physical withdrawal from nicotine does not cause any real suffering. There may be sensations, but they are not pain. And many people don't feel anything at all. Secondly, you have already known life without tobacco. You weren't born a smoker, you became one. You lived for years without cigarettes, fully capable and in control. Quitting will not change who you are, you will simply be in better shape, both physically and mentally. Thirdly, there is no danger in not smoking. This may seem obvious, but it is worth repeating. On the contrary, continuing to smoke involves very real risks. And finally, fourthly, the real danger would be to continue. What awaits you, if you don't act, is the same repetitive cycle: I have to quit. Someday. That day can be today. Now take the time to smoke that very last cigarette, mindfully. This is the moment to say goodbye to it. Like breaking free from a toxic relationship, you open your eyes, turn the page, and don't look back. This is the moment to pause this video. Then come back and listen to the final recommendations to escape the trap for good. Let's start with an essential point: never question the decision to quit smoking. It is the best decision a smoker can make. Every smoker dreams of it. And if this decision is here today, it's because there was enough of this addiction. Then, it is important to make a clear and final promise to yourself: never again take in nicotine in any form. This includes cigarettes, cigarillos, cigars, rolling tobacco or pipe tobacco, hookah, electronic cigarettes, patches, gums, lozenges, anything that contains nicotine has no place anymore. In fact, we should not say quit smoking but stop all nicotine intake. Next, you simply need to let it happen. In the days to come, the little nicotine monster will stir before it disappears. Don't be fooled, it is neither a friend nor an ally. It is the one that has tried to harm you, day after day. Let it die out, and if it bothers you, treat it for what it is, a poison. In most cases, withdrawal sensations last only 2 or 3 days. The mindset to cultivate is not "I have to hang on but I'm done with this." Another important thing, there's no need to try to force the idea of cigarettes out of your mind. That would be as absurd as trying not to think about Christmas in December. You will think about it, especially at key moments of daily life. What matters is not thinking about it, but changing the way you think about it, as a useless, harmful product that you do not miss. There is also no need to change your habits or avoid smokers. You can go to the same places, see the same people. What changes is your perspective. These smokers are not really choosing to smoke, they are prisoners of it. And deep down, many will envy you for having taken that step. Don't try to project yourself too far ahead. Your brain doesn't yet know how to imagine certain situations without a cigarette, and that's normal. Each experience without smoking will show you it's possible, and each moment you go through will make the fear fade a little more. It is also essential to throw away all your cigarettes, those you have on you, at home, in your car, in your things. Keep nothing. They are toxic waste, nothing more. Moreover, no nicotine substitute will truly help you. Continuing to feed the addiction, even by reducing the doses, only prolongs the problem. And it sends your brain the message that you are giving up something valuable. But it's not a loss, it's a liberation. Smoking is a disease. The goal is not to replace one disease with another. Regarding weight, there is no inevitability. Many people do not gain a single gram when they quit, and some even lose weight. If the idea of an e-cigarette crosses your mind, remember, nicotine, even electronic, is still nicotine. And we do not need it to live. Finally, even if all this seems simple, don't let your guard down. Just because it is easy to quit doesn't mean starting again would be without consequences. Don't play with this decision. Tobacco is a hard drug, acting mainly on a psychological level. And remember that first piece of advice: never doubt the choice you have made. We have reached the end of this video, which I hope marks the beginning of your new life without tobacco. Tobacco remains, without a doubt, one of the most absurd and most deadly drugs. Do not touch it again. Relapsing would mean falling back into a trap, for a long time. I wish you a beautiful and long life, permanently free from tobacco.